Hey guys, so my name's Jason Hebert. This is really my first YouTube video I've ever made of me just kind of sitting down, talking, especially telling stories. I've held on to these stories for a really long time. I've told them about 100 times to everybody around me, people I meet, things like that. Most of these are kind of like my go-to stories because, to be honest with you, they're the most interesting thing that ever happened to me personally, as far as that anyone else would want to hear. People don't want to hear stories about people they don't know. So tell them a story about me and one of my good friends. They don't really care. Not as much anyway. So I just want to set a few ground rules as to what I'm going to be doing on this channel. I have a good amount of stories. I'm probably going to be able to stretch it into about 10 videos or so from the few stories I have. Every single word of these stories is true. Okay. How do you know that? Well, a couple of reasons. One is none of these really make me look good. If I was going to try to make myself look cool or something, which people have accused me of before. Oh, wow, all this happened to you in such a short time. Yeah, it did. And believe me, if I was going to be making up stories, it would have been how I slept with some famous, sexy singer or something. These are nothing like that. Pretty much every single one of these make me look bad. And that's the first reason. The second reason is you're probably going to be able to tell I'm not sitting there going through some specific notes. I do have a couple little pointers that I keep looking over at to make sure I don't miss anything, because I'm just kind of freestyling this. So if I have to go back and explain something again, or if I forget something, that's the reason why. Another ground rule is just like these stories make me look bad, they pretty much make everyone else look bad. It was just absolute chaos when I was out there. So I apologize to the people whose names I do mention. It is what it is. These stories are true. This is how it happened. So I don't know what else to say. But this is a part of my story. So my life story. So I'm allowed to tell it, and they're allowed to tell it as well. If any of them remember it, because I'm sure I'm just a blip in any of these people's life, if that. So the other thing I want to be clear on is I am a writer. Okay. And yes, I'm going to be using this channel as a way to kind of grow my fan base, people who know about me. I mean, one of the best ways to get people kind of into your story is to tell that story. And this is my story. So anyone who's going to say, oh, you're only doing this to get a bunch of people interested in all that. Yeah, I am. I'm using my life story to get people interested in my life. So if you think that's a bad thing, this series probably won't be for you, because I don't think that's too bad of a thing. So I'm going to name this series The Producer, the Actress, and the Brother. And it'll be clear as to why. Those are obviously the three principal characters in my time out in Hollywood. I'm originally from Boston, by the way. I notice when I'm talking like this, I tend to not use my Boston accent as much. I don't know if I'm just trying to speak proper or what it is, but I usually have a very thick accent, so it'll probably come out here and there, kind of like that. The first story is going to center on the producer. It's probably not the most interesting of all of them, but I'm going to kind of go in chronological order here, how this all started. I was actually only 15 years old when this started. It was the summer between school years when I was 15. Back in the 90s. I'm 35 now. I'm going to be 36 in December. So how it all started is I started learning basic HTML, making crappy little websites. This is back in the day of AOL. If anyone remembers the original AOL, not AOL Messenger, that came a little later, AOL IM there. Although the original AOL had Instant Messenger, but it was, the full program. You'd listen to the dial-up and all that kind of stuff. They had something you could go to called Member Directory, where you would go and you could type in someone's name. You could type in their occupation, I think like a quote or something. It had like maybe 8 categories. It was probably like the most basic of what MySpace and Facebook and all them would become, just the general information thing. And so what I did was I just put into occupation, I think I put movie producer, searched, and at the time there was about 100 or 200 screen name limit. It would bring up a bunch of AOL screen names that fit whatever you search for. So I emailed I can't remember if it was 100 or 200, but it was one or the other. Every single person on that list I emailed. And obviously a few of them, I believe, came back, like no longer active, and you got to delete it and send it out as something. It's been 20 years now, but sent it to a lot of people. One guy responded. I'm actually gonna leave this guy's name out of the story. The reason for that, there's a couple of reasons. First off, no one really knows his name. He's a very underground kind of trying to make it happen producer. It's not going to add any juice to the story. And he's my friend as well as somebody I worked for. I still consider him a friend. And that's it. So there's really no need. I'll call him Bob for now. It's good enough. So Bob is the guy that responded. See, like I said, I'm going to have to keep going back. So I learned the HTML and I made this. I was making crappy ass websites. I think I made one for like South Park or something, just, trying out all these things because it was new back at then. And I made one trying to fake like I was a screenwriting company. I don't even remember how I found out about screenwriting. I'm sure just watching movies and, looked into how they're made and all that. So I made all these fake amounts of, we write screenplays or, movie scripts, I probably called them back then, for, let's say $500 and this and that. It was probably so poorly done, but to a 15-year-old, I'm sure I thought I was getting away with it. So nobody responds but this one guy, Bob, and he had looked at the website. So he messages me and he starts asking me all these questions like, so what about royalties, and what about all these business related questions. I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm trying to just fake my way through it all. And eventually he just says, all right, look, kid, I like to work with young and upcoming talent. Are you just somebody that's trying to look to break in and all that? I say, yeah. I just kind of come clean because I have no way of answering what he's asking me. And keep in mind, this is before you could Google any question on earth. I don't even know if Google was around back then, but if it was, it wasn't nearly as comprehensive. So I couldn't just type his question into Google and come up with a fake answer. Back then, I remember I used to use like Web Crawler and Ask Jeeves and all these kind of things, which probably would have gave me some kind of answer. But again, it wasn't comprehensive. So I tell him, yep. So he gives me this idea. He says, I want you to write a screenplay. I think he told me to write, I want to say 10 pages. It was called Anew, Anew, and it was like one of those apocalyptic kind of, post-apocalyptic stories where the world ends and, the survivors are trying to make it and all these things. I had no idea screenplays weren't written like, say, a book. So I sent him what's 10 pages to me. He responds back, loving it, and saying, why didn't you format it right? You sent me about, I think he said 30, 40 pages. Because if you know anything about screenplays versus books, they're very spaced out. And, every time the character speaks, his name is one full line. It's much less text than in a book. So he ends up telling me in an email, he's talking to me through instant messenger most of the time, but he also emails me like how a format is done. I remember being specific about when you do ... you have to put spaces between, space dot, space dot, space dot. He has all these little rules like that. And he actually sent me Final Draft, which I installed, and that's what I wrote Anew on. And I have no idea, but I'm sure whatever I wrote for him was awful. He probably, to be honest with you, he must have liked it, because when you hear how far we went with this, he had to have liked it. But I don't know why he did, because it was not good. It took me years before I became even decent at screenwriting, and that was my first try ever. So I ended up writing this thing. It took me probably the majority of the summer. To give you an idea of when it was, I specifically remember, I forget if it was MTV or BET, but I would be up all night and I would be writing, and I would leave either MTV or BET on, and they would play like the same segments over and over and over again. And I remember specifically the songs that were on were Closing Time by, what's the song? Supersonic or something, the band Supersonic, something like that. Closing Time was around the time that came out. And then I want to say maybe like Natalie Imbruglia had a song where they're taking all the furniture from her apartment or something. So it was right around then. That's when I was writing Anew. And he loved it. And so he ends up sending me back actual contracts with lawyers, names, signatures, and all this. So I'm freaking out, completely thinking I'm on the way to Hollywood. I remember actually being in math class in ninth grade now, because this is a couple months after I wrote it, and I'm waiting. And it was, I was new to ninth grade, new to high school, and just sitting there thinking, please have this guy send me something saying I made $1 million off the screenplay, fly me out to Hollywood, get me rich and famous. And I remember actually sitting there thinking in math class, my math teacher, yelling at me about something, and thinking, yeah, don't worry about it, buddy. I'll be out of here within a couple months. Little did I know, 20 years later, I'm making these tapes, really nowhere farther than where I was then. But so is the Hollywood journey. So basically, how this story ends is nothing ends up happening from it. I get extremely frustrated from dealing with this guy. And it's all my fault because he's doing everything he can, and the screenplay probably sucked. But he's feeding me these things that to this day I don't believe. Like he told me once over email or instant messenger, oh, someone I know told Leonardo DiCaprio about your screenplay, and he said something like, wow, what a great story, and that could definitely make tons of money. And I remember telling my stepfather, him saying, dude, if Leonardo DiCaprio likes your story, you're gonna make it. I had all these little hopes and dreams, and he's probably just telling me that to keep me going and keep me excited. But in the end, it really did nothing for me. So I yelled at him one day over email because it was taking too long, and I always regretted doing that. It's just my temper kicking in because I just wanted, I hated high school. I was getting sick of the city I was living in. I just I had that LA dream, man, of just going out there and making it. So I'm going to start simple. That's kind of where this story ends. Trust me, they get much, much better. And the next story takes up 4 or 5 years later when I fly out to LA on a whim and I meet this guy. So go ahead and stay tuned, and I'll tell you that one soon, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one.